Blood dripped down my face as I desperately pounded on my parents' front door. My shoulders screamed in agony with each movement, but I had to keep knocking. I could barely see through my swollen eye, barely breathe through my broken nose. "Help," I croaked, my voice a ragged whisper. Just moments ago, my brother-in-law Craig had brutally attacked me, all because I refused to co-sign their mortgage. And Jessica, my own sister, had stood there watching, saying I deserved it. As my parents' door swung open, their faces morphed from confusion to horror. I collapsed into their arms as darkness closed in around me. I woke up to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the concerned faces of my parents hovering above me. My father's weathered hand gripped mine, while my mother dabbed tears from her eyes. "Gail, can you hear us, honey?" Mom whispered, her voice trembling. I tried to nod, but pain shot through my head. The doctor explained I had a concussion, dislocated shoulder, broken nose, and multiple facial lacerations. The police would need my statement soon, but first they wanted me to rest. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, my mind kept rewinding to 2 weeks earlier. Jessica and I had always been close, growing up just 18 months apart in age. Despite different personalities, she was the adventurous one. While I was more cautious, we'd always had each other's backs. We spoke nearly every day, even after she married Craig 3 years ago. That Tuesday evening, Jessica had called, her voice unusually bright. "Gail, Craig and I want to invite you over for dinner tomorrow. We have something important to discuss with you." I arrived at their small apartment the next evening, with a bottle of wine, greeted by Jessica's warm hug and Craig's firm handshake. Throughout dinner, they exchanged excited glances, until finally, over dessert, they revealed their big news. "We found our dream house," Jessica exclaimed, sliding photos across the table. 4 bedrooms, huge backyard, perfect neighborhood for starting a family. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for them. "When are you closing?" Craig cleared his throat. "Well, that's what we wanted to talk to you about. The bank needs a guarantor. My credit history is complicated." Jessica jumped in. "It's just temporary, Gail. Once Craig's business takes off next year, we'll refinance and remove you from the loan. We need someone with a solid income and credit history." Craig added, his eyes intensely focused on mine. "You're doing so well at your architecture firm, and this would really help us start our family." The pressure in the room was palpable. I glanced at the pictures again. It was indeed a beautiful house, but something felt off. "I'd need to think about this," I said carefully. "How much is the mortgage?" When Craig mentioned the amount, $450,000, my stomach dropped. That was a massive commitment, especially for someone else's loan. "Can I have a few days to consider it?" I asked. Craig's jaw tightened slightly. "The seller needs an answer by Monday. Other buyers are interested. I'll decide by then," I promised, noticing Jessica's smile falter. The next day, I consulted a financial advisor who strongly advised against co-signing. "If they default, you're legally responsible for the full amount," she warned. "Plus, it affects your ability to get your own mortgage later." Over the weekend, I researched Craig's business ventures. What I found disturbed me. 3 failed startups in 5 years, a pattern of ambitious projects abandoned halfway through. Nothing in his history suggested his current venture would succeed where others had failed. By Sunday, I knew my answer. I called Jessica, hoping she'd understand. "Jess, I've given this a lot of thought. I want to help, but I can't co-sign the mortgage. It's too big a risk for me financially." Silence hung on the line. "Then I always knew you were selfish." Her words stung. "Jess, that's not fair. I can help you find other options, maybe a different lender, or—" "Save it," she snapped. "Craig was right about you all along." The call ended abruptly. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications. Jessica had sent a group text to our extended family, heartbroken, that Gail is trying to prevent us from starting our family. After everything I've done for her, this is how she repays me. I stared at my phone in disbelief. This wasn't just disappointment. This was manipulation, and it was only the beginning. The family group chat erupted with messages of support for Jessica and confusion about my decision. Aunt Martha wrote, Family should always come first, Gail. Uncle Pete chimed in. Your sister was there for you during college. Time to return the favor. Even my cousins, who barely spoke to Jessica, normally suddenly became her defenders. I felt sick. Jessica had twisted the narrative completely. During college, I had worked 2 jobs while maintaining a scholarship. Jessica had been busy with her own life during those years. If anything, I had helped her financially several times when she'd overspent. 2 days later, at our monthly family dinner, I arrived hoping to clear the air. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Conversation stopped when I entered Grandma Jean's dining room. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. There she is, muttered my cousin Tara, not quite under her breath. Throughout dinner, pointed comments flew across the table. Some people just don't understand the meaning of family, said Uncle Pete, staring directly at me. Jessica sat beside Craig, occasionally dabbing at non-existent tears, while he rubbed her back supportively. When I tried to explain my position, Craig interrupted. We're not asking for charity, just a signature. Gail makes 6 figures designing fancy buildings, but apparently that's more important than her sister's happiness. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. That's not fair. This is a major financial commitment. You know what's not fair, Jessica cut in. Me being 31 and still unable to start a family because we can't get a decent house. By dessert, I was fighting back tears. As I helped clear plates, Aunt Sally followed me into the kitchen. Unlike the others, her eyes held compassion rather than judgment. Got a minute to talk outside? She asked quietly. On Grandma's back porch, Sally lit a cigarette and offered me one. I declined. You made the right call, Gail, she said, exhaling smoke into the cool evening air. My second husband asked my brother to co-sign a business loan. When the business tanked, it nearly bankrupted him. Thanks, I said, grateful for at least one ally. I don't understand why Jessica is acting like this. We've always been so close. Sally took another drag. People get desperate when money's involved. Have you looked into Craig's background? I nodded. His businesses never seem to last. Gambling, Sally said simply. His father had the same problem. Lost their family home when Craig was a teenager. This new information hit me like a bucket of cold water. How do you know that? Small world. My friend Denise dated his uncle years ago. Craig's got the same look in his eyes his father had, always chasing the big win. Back inside, I watched Craig more carefully. The way he constantly checked his phone, his nervous energy, how his eyes lit up when discussing the potential value of their investment. The signs were there if you knew to look for them. Later that week, I tried to reach out to Jessica privately. After several ignored calls, she finally agreed to meet for coffee. I miss you, I told her honestly. This whole situation is tearing us apart. Jessica stared into her latte, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, her composure cracked. Tears filled her eyes. Craig's in trouble, Gail, she whispered. He lost our savings. All of it. Gambling? I asked gently. She looked up, surprised. How did you know? It doesn't matter. Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning? Jessica wiped her eyes. He promised he'd stop if we moved somewhere. Knew somewhere better for the baby. Baby? I felt my heart skip. You're pregnant. She nodded, placing a hand protectively over her still flat stomach. 8 weeks. I haven't told anyone else yet. The pieces clicked into place. Jessica's desperation suddenly made sense. She wasn't just chasing a dream house. She was trying to create stability before her child arrived. Jess, I want to help you. I really do. But co-signing a mortgage isn't the answer. Let me help you find an apartment, something you can afford. I'll contribute to the baby expenses. For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. Then her phone buzzed. Craig's name flashed on the screen. She glanced at the message, and her expression hardened. I should go, she said, gathering her things. Think about what I said, I pleaded. There are other options. She hesitated at the door. I'll talk to Craig. I felt cautiously optimistic as we parted ways. Maybe we could find a solution together that didn't involve me putting my financial future at risk. That night, I received an email with an attachment. The sender was Craig, the subject line blank. I opened the attachment and froze. It was a mortgage application, with my signature on it, a signature I had never provided. They had forged my name on a legal document. My hands shook as I examined the forgery. It was good enough to fool someone who didn't know my signature well. This wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. And it changed everything. The next morning I drove to Jessica and Craig's apartment, the forged document tucked in my purse. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had barely slept, torn between anger, betrayal, and concern for my pregnant sister. I checked my phone before getting out of the car. Jessica hadn't responded to my text asking if she was home. But her car was in its usual spot, so I assumed she was inside. I took a deep breath and walked to their second-floor apartment. Craig answered the door in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, looking surprised to see me. "Gail, Jessica's not here. She went grocery shopping. I need to talk to both of you," I said firmly. "I'll wait." He hesitated, then stepped back to let me in. The apartment was messier than usual, takeout containers on the coffee table, mail scattered across the counter. Craig cleared space on the couch without making eye contact. "Want something to drink?" he asked, his tone oddly formal. "No thanks. Actually, I'd like you to explain this." I pulled out the forged document and placed it on the coffee table between us. Craig glanced at it, his expression unreadable. "What about it?" "That's not my signature." He shrugged. "Looks like yours to me." "Cut the crap, Craig. You forged my signature on a mortgage application. That's fraud." "You wouldn't help us," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "We did what we had to do." I felt a chill run down my spine at his casual admission. "This is a federal crime. You could go to prison." Craig leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. "Listen, Gail, you don't understand the position we're in." "Then explain it to me." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. "I owe some people money. A lot of money. From gambling." His eyes snapped to mine. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter. How much do you owe?" Craig stood up abruptly and began pacing. 60,000. And they're not the kind of people who offer payment plans. I felt sick. Does Jessica know the real amount? She knows enough. He stopped pacing and stared at me. "The house is our way out. I can take equity from it to clear the debt. In a few years, when my business takes off." "Your business is failing, Craig. Just like the last 3. His face darkened. "You don't know anything about my business. I know you've never finished what you've started. I know you're dragging my sister down with you." I stood up, grabbing the forged document. "I'm not pressing charges if you destroy this application and any copies. Then we can discuss how to really help Jessica and the baby." Craig stepped closer, invading my personal space. "You think you're better than me, don't you, Miss Successful Architect? With her fancy degree and perfect credit score." I tried to step around him. "I'm leaving. Tell Jessica to call me when she gets back." He blocked my path. "You're not going anywhere until you sign the real application. Move out of my way." I reached for my phone in my purse. Craig's hand shot out, knocking my purse to the floor. "You're going to sign it." Or what I challenged, trying to hide my growing fear. What happened next occurred so quickly, I barely had time to react. Craig's face contorted with rage as he shoved me hard against the wall. My head snapped back, hitting the drywall with a sickening thud. Before I could recover, his fist connected with my face. Pain exploded across my cheekbone and eye. I slid down the wall, tasting blood. "Craig, stop," I screamed. He grabbed my arm, wrenching it at an unnatural angle. I heard a pop, followed by excruciating pain in my shoulder. I couldn't move my arm anymore. "You think you can threaten me?" he shouted, his face inches from mine. "You think I'll let you ruin everything?" I was sobbing now, curled on the floor, trying to protect myself. "Please stop. Please." The apartment door opened. Craig, they didn't have the Jessica, froze in the doorway, groceries in her arms. "Jess, help me," I pleaded, blood streaming from my nose. I'll never forget what happened next. Jessica set down the groceries, her face pale. But instead of coming to my aid, she turned to Craig. What did she do? Craig straightened up, breathing heavily. She was going to report us for the application. Said she'd have me arrested. Jessica looked down at me, her sister bleeding and broken on her floor. And then she said words that cut deeper than any physical wound. Why couldn't you just sign the papers? This is your fault. In that moment, something broke between us that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. My own sister watching me being assaulted and blaming me for it. A loud knock at the door startled all of us. "Everything okay in there?" a man's voice called. We heard shouting and a loud thump. Craig and Jessica exchanged panicked looks. I seized the opportunity, scrambling to my feet despite the searing pain. "Help!" I screamed. "He's attacking me." Craig lunged toward me again, but Jessica grabbed his arm. "The neighbors will call the police," she hissed. Using their momentary distraction, I stumbled to the door and flung it open. An older couple stood there, the man already on his phone, calling 911. "Oh my God," the woman gasped, seeing my condition. I pushed past them, clutching my useless arm, and half ran, half stumbled down the stairs to my car. Behind me, I heard Craig shouting and Jessica calling my name, but I didn't look back. Somehow I managed to get into my car one-handed and lock the doors. My vision was blurry, my right eye swelling shut, but I started the engine and pulled away. I needed to get somewhere safe. My parents' house was just 15 minutes away. As I drove, blood dripped onto my clothes. Every bump in the road sent waves of agony through my shoulder. I fumbled for my phone with my good hand and tried to call 911, but I could barely speak coherently through my tears and the pain. "Attack, my brother-in-law, going to my parents," was all I managed to tell the dispatcher before dropping the phone. By the time I reached my parents' house, I was barely conscious. The world tilted and swayed around me as I staggered to their front door, leaving a trail of blood drops on their pristine walkway. I pounded on the door with my good hand, praying they were home. "Mom, Dad." My voice was barely audible now. The door swung open, and I saw my father's expression change from annoyance to horror in an instant. "Margaret," he shouted for my mother. "Call an ambulance." As they caught me in their arms, everything went black. I awoke to the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room, the steady beep of monitors filling the silence. My body felt like it had been hit by a truck. When I tried to move, pain shot through my shoulder and face. "She's awake," I heard my mother say, her voice thick with emotion. A nurse appeared in my field of vision. "Try not to move too much, honey. You've been through quite an ordeal." Gradually, the events came flooding back. Craig's rage, the attack, Jessica's betrayal. I closed my eyes, wishing I could block out the memories as easily. Dr. Wilson arrived to explain my injuries: concussion, dislocated shoulder, broken nose, facial lacerations, requiring 20 stitches, and significant bruising across my body. My shoulder had been reset while I was unconscious, but I would need physical therapy for weeks. "You're very lucky," she said gravely. "Head trauma can be unpredictable. We'll want to keep you overnight for observation." My parents sat beside my bed, my mother's eyes red from crying, my father's face set in a hard line I'd rarely seen before. "The police want to speak with you," Dad said. "When you're ready." "Has Jessica called?" I asked, my voice hoarse. My parents exchanged glances. "Let's not worry about that now, Mom," said, smoothing my hair back from my forehead. 2 officers arrived an hour later. Officer Daniels, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, and Officer Torres, a younger woman, who took notes as I recounted what happened. I told them everything from the mortgage request to the forged document to the attack. My voice broke several times during the story. "We've already been to the apartment," Officer Daniels explained. "Mr. Turner claims you attacked him first, and he acted in self-defense." "That's ridiculous," my father interjected. "Look at her." Officer Torres nodded. "The nature of Miss Reynolds' injuries is inconsistent with self-defense. We've taken photographs for evidence." "What happens now?" I asked. "We're arresting Mr. Turner for aggravated assault. The district attorney will decide on additional charges related to the forgery." After they left, I drifted in and out of sleep, disturbed by nightmares of Craig's face contorted in rage. Around 8 that evening, a commotion in the hallway woke me. "She's my sister. I have a right to see her." Jessica's voice. My heart raced as my mother stepped into the hallway, closing the door partially behind her. "She's resting, Jessica. This isn't the time. Mom, please. I need to talk to her." There was a brief argument before my mother reluctantly allowed Jessica in. She stood at the foot of my bed, her face pale and drawn. When she saw my injuries in the harsh hospital lighting, she covered her mouth. "Oh God, Gail. I didn't realize." "What?" "That your husband nearly killed me." My voice was cold, unfamiliar, even to myself. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I never thought he'd hurt you like this. He's never been violent before." "That's a lie, and you know it," I said. "You're afraid of him too. I can see it." She looked away, confirming my suspicion. "Why are you really here, Jessica?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "They arrested Craig. You have to drop the charges." I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "You don't understand," she pleaded. "The people Craig owes money to, they're dangerous. If he's in jail, they'll come after me next." "Then leave him. Stay with Mom and Dad until this blows over." Jessica shook her head frantically. "It's not that simple. He knows people who could hurt all of us. Our whole family." I studied my sister's face, the dark circles under her eyes, the nervous way she kept glancing at the door. This wasn't just about money anymore. Jessica was genuinely terrified. "What have you gotten yourself into?" I whispered. "Just please," she begged, "drop the charges, for all our sakes." "He nearly killed me, Jess. And you stood there and let it happen." Pain flashed across her face. I was scared. I froze. "You have no idea what it's been like living with him these past few months." "Then why stay?" She placed a protective hand over her stomach. "You know why." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Visiting hours are over, and Miss Reynolds needs her rest." Jessica leaned down, whispering urgently, "Think about what I said, please." After she left, I lay awake for hours, torn between anger, fear, and concern for my sister and her unborn child. The Jessica I knew would never defend a man who had assaulted her sister. What kind of hold did Craig have over her? And were his threats against our family real, or just another manipulation? The next morning, Detective Amanda Parker from the Special Victims Unit came to take a more detailed statement. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Your brother-in-law was released on bail this morning," she informed me. My stomach dropped. Already. First-time offender, stable residence, pregnant wife. Judge Wilson is known for being lenient with bail. And the forgery charges. Still under investigation. Financial crimes take longer to process. She leaned forward. "Miss Reynolds, Gail, I understand your sister visited you last night." I nodded cautiously. "Did she ask you to drop the charges?" "How did you know?" Detective Parker sighed. "It's unfortunately common in domestic violence cases. Perpetrators use various forms of pressure, emotional manipulation, threats, financial control to make victims recant." "I'm not dropping the charges," I said firmly. "Good, because what happened to you was a serious crime." She handed me her card. "Call me anytime, day or night, especially if Mr. Turner attempts to contact you." As I was discharged that afternoon, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Drop the charges if you know what's good for you and your family." I showed it to Detective Parker, who was still completing paperwork. "We'll trace it," she promised. "In the meantime, don't stay alone, and consider getting a restraining order." My parents insisted I stay with them while recovering. My father installed a security system, and my mother barely let me out of her sight. My boss, Michael, was understanding about my absence, sending flowers, and arranging for me to work remotely when I felt up to it. But as days passed, the threats continued. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. A brick through my parents' window with a note. "Next time it won't be glass that breaks." My car vandalized in their driveway. The police increased patrols in the neighborhood, but admitted they couldn't provide round-the-clock protection. Meanwhile, Half our extended family still believed I was somehow to blame, having heard only Jessica and Craig's version of events. She must have provoked him, Aunt Martha told my mother. Craig's always been such a gentleman. The isolation and fear began to wear me down. Nightmares plagued my sleep. Loud noises made me jump. The confident, independent woman I'd once been was disappearing, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone afraid of her own shadow. And through it all, Jessica stood by Craig, defending him to the family, accompanying him to court appearances. I hadn't spoken to her since that night in the hospital, though she occasionally texted to repeat her pleas that I drop the charges. 1 month after the attack, as I sat on my parents' porch trying to enjoy the sunshine, Aunt Sally's car pulled into the driveway. She'd been my only consistent supporter besides my parents. "Thought you could use some company," she said, settling into the chair beside me. "And some information." "What kind of information?" Sally lit a cigarette, ignoring my mother's rule about smoking on the porch. "I've been doing some digging into Craig's background." "Why?" "Because something about this whole situation stinks." She exhaled a stream of smoke. "Did you know he was married before Jessica?" I shook my head. "For less than a year. His ex-wife lives in Portland now." Sally handed me a folded piece of paper with a phone number. "She might have some insights you'd find interesting." Later that day, I called the number. The woman who answered was cautious at first, but when I explained who I was and what had happened, her tone changed. "I wish I'd warned your sister years ago," she said. "Craig did the same thing to me. Charming at first, then controlling, then violent when he didn't get his way. The gambling, the debts, the threats. It's all painfully familiar." "Did you press charges?" I asked. "I tried, but I was too afraid to follow through. His gambling buddies started following me, calling my workplace. I ended up moving across the country to get away from him." "Why are you telling me this now?" Her voice grew quiet. "Because I've carried the guilt for years, wondering if he'd hurt someone else because I was too scared to put him away." As I hung up, I knew what I had to do. Despite the threats, despite Jessica's pleas, I couldn't back down. If I did, Craig would continue hurting people, including eventually my sister and her child. The cycle had to end with me. 2 months after the attack, I hit rock bottom. Though my physical injuries were healing, my shoulder, regaining mobility, the bruises fading to yellowish smudges, my emotional state was deteriorating rapidly. I jumped at every sound. Panic attacks struck without warning, leaving me gasping for breath, convinced I was dying. Sleep came only with medication, and even then nightmares of Craig's rage jolted me awake most nights. I'd lost 15 pounds from my already slim frame, food tasting like ash in my mouth. The trial was still months away, delayed by procedural motions from Craig's expensive attorney. Each day felt like an eternity, the weight of uncertainty crushing me. That Wednesday morning, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed woman looking back at me. Dark circles underscored my bloodshot eyes. My cheekbones protruded sharply beneath pale skin. "This isn't me," I whispered to my reflection. "This isn't who I am." My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "My boss team meeting today at 2. Can you join by video?" I hadn't been to the office in weeks. Though Michael had been patient, allowing me to work remotely, I knew my position at the architectural firm was becoming precarious. 3 major projects needed attention, clients were asking questions, and my responses had been increasingly delayed and unfocused. "I'll try," I texted back. But as 2 o'clock approached, anxiety overwhelmed me. What if Craig somehow found out where I was working from? What if he had someone watching me? What if the video call triggered another panic attack? I sent a last-minute excuse and turned off my phone, collapsing onto the bed in tears. Even my career, the one thing I'd always excelled at, was slipping away. A soft knock at the bedroom door interrupted my breakdown. "Gail, there's someone here to see you," my mother called. "I don't want to see anyone," I responded, my voice muffled by the pillow. "It's Sally. She says it's important." Reluctantly, I wiped my face and went downstairs. Aunt Sally sat at the kitchen table, a manila folder in front of her. She'd been my rock throughout this ordeal, the one person, besides my parents, who believed me unconditionally. "You look like hell," she said bluntly. I almost smiled at her characteristic directness. "Thanks. I feel worse. Sit down. We need to talk." I slid into the chair across from her, as my mother discreetly left the room. "You're letting him win," Sally said. "What?" "Craig. He's winning. Look at you, you're falling apart while he's out there living his life, controlling Jessica, intimidating your family." Her words stung. "That's not fair. You have no idea what I'm going through." Sally's expression softened. "Actually, I do." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a jagged scar running from her wrist to her elbow. "My first husband gave me this when I told him I wanted a divorce." I stared at the scar, speechless. "I was 22, she continued. "Younger than you are now. I did what you're doing. Hid at my parents' house. Stopped seeing friends, quit my job. I was terrified all the time." "What happened?" "He found me anyway. Broke into my parents' house one night when they were out." She traced the scar with her fingertip. "I nearly bled to death." "Oh my God, Sally. I had no idea." Not many people do. It was the 70s. Domestic violence wasn't discussed openly. The police treated it like a lover's quarrel gone wrong. "Did he go to prison?" Sally shook her head. "I was too afraid to press charges. He promised he'd kill me if I did." "What did you do?" "I ran. Changed my name. Moved to another state. Lived looking over my shoulder for years." Her eyes, usually so sharp, clouded with old pain. "It's my biggest regret not standing up to him. Not making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else." She opened the manila folder, spreading photographs across the table. I recognized Craig, with his arm around various women, all taken at different times, judging by his changing appearance. 5 women that I've been able to track down, Sally explained. All with similar stories about Craig. Charm, control, violence when they tried to leave or refused his demands. None pressed charges. All too afraid of what he might do. "How did you find them?" "I have connections from my days as a paralegal. And let's just say Craig's not smart enough to cover his tracks well." I picked up one photo, Craig, with a pretty redhead, who looked vaguely familiar. "That's Ann Miller," Sally said. "She worked at Riverside Hospital until 3 years ago when she suddenly relocated to Arizona." "Sound familiar?" It clicked. That's where Craig met Jessica. She was doing her nursing rotation at Riverside. Sally nodded. "Pattern of behavior. He finds women in the same places, uses the same tactics." Anne left because he became violent when she wouldn't lend him money. "Does Jessica know about these women?" "I tried to tell her last week. She refused to listen." Sally gathered the photos back into the folder. "The point is, Craig's not going to stop. Not with Jessica. Not with you. Not with anyone. The threats, the intimidation, it's all designed to make you give up. And if you do, he wins," I finished. "Exactly. That night I had a nightmare so vivid it felt real. Jessica was in a hospital bed, her face bruised, crying out for help. Craig stood over her, his back to me. When he turned, he was holding a newborn baby. 'This is your fault,' he said, using the same words Jessica had spoken to me. 'You should have signed the papers.' I woke up gasping, sheets drenched in sweat. The dream lingered, leaving me with a sense of dread that followed me throughout the morning. As I mindlessly scrolled through emails trying to focus on work, my phone rang. Detective Parker's name flashed on the screen. "Gail, are you somewhere private?" she asked when I answered. "Yes, I'm at my parents' house. What's wrong?" "We've been monitoring communications between Craig and some of his associates. There's been chatter about taking care of the witness problem before the trial." My blood ran cold. "He's planning something against me." "We think so, but we don't have enough for an arrest yet. I've arranged for additional patrols near your parents' house, but I need you to be extra vigilant." After we hung up, I sat frozen fear, threatening to overwhelm me again. Then I glanced at the corner of my desk, where Sally's folder, still Saturday. Those women had run, had lived in fear, and Craig had simply moved on to the next victim. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The fear was still there, but alongside it grew something stronger: determination. I thought of my sister pregnant and trapped in a relationship with a violent man. I thought of her unborn child who deserved better than Craig as a father. I pulled out my laptop and began researching domestic violence resources. I called Ann Miller in Arizona, who provided more details about Craig's patterns of abuse. I reached out to the other women Sally had identified collecting their stories. Then I called Detective Parker with a proposal. "I'm tired of being hunted," I told her. "I want to set a trap instead." She was silent for a moment. "What did you have in mind?" "Craig thinks I'm weak, terrified. Let's use that against him." Over the next week, I worked with Parker to develop a plan. It was risky, but if successful, it would not only protect me, but potentially save Jessica and her baby from years of abuse. First, I let word leak through family channels that I was considering dropping the charges, feeling too stressed to continue. Then, I accidentally left a voicemail for Jessica that could be interpreted as me wavering in my resolve. Predictably, Craig took the bait. He called late one evening from a blocked number. "I hear you're finally seeing reason," he said, his voice smug. Following Parker's coaching, I played along. "I just want this to be over. I can't take the stress anymore." "Smart girl. Here's what's going to happen. You'll tell the DA you want to drop the charges. You'll say you exaggerated what happened because you were angry about the mortgage situation. And then you'll leave my family alone," I asked, injecting a tremor into my voice. "As long as you stick to the story." His tone hardened. "But if you're thinking of playing games, remember who's really in control here." The call ended, and I immediately phoned Detective Parker to report the conversation, which had been recorded as evidence of witness intimidation. The next day, I received a text from an unknown number, Pier 12 tonight, 7 p.m. Come alone if you want proof of what happens to people who cross Craig's friends. It was exactly what we'd been waiting for. Craig wasn't just a violent man with gambling debts. He was connected to organized crime figures who were already under FBI surveillance. His threats weren't empty. They were backed by dangerous people. But Craig had made a critical mistake. The dangerous connections he'd leveraged to terrorize Jessica and me were actually the targets of an ongoing FBI investigation into money laundering and racketeering. And now he had inadvertently provided the connection the FBI had been looking for. That evening, while I remained safely at a police station, a female officer resembling me from a distance went to Pier 12 wearing a wire. Craig never showed sending one of his gambling associates, instead a man named Victor Mendez, who was already on the FBI's radar. The sting operation yielded even more than we'd hoped. Mendez, believing he was intimidating me, revealed details of Craig's gambling operation and his role in laundering money through failed business ventures. Detective Parker called me the next morning, her voice triumphant. "We got him, Gail. And not just for assault. The FBI is taking over the case, wire fraud, money laundering, extortion." "What about Jessica?" I asked. "We're sending a female officer to speak with her today. Given the new evidence, we're hoping she'll cooperate." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Craig wasn't just facing assault charges anymore. He was entangled in a federal investigation that would be much harder to escape. That afternoon, I sat down at my desk and opened my work email. Instead of the panic that had recently accompanied any professional responsibility, I felt a strange calm. I could do this. I could reclaim my life. I began responding to emails, reviewing design plans, rescheduling meetings. When Michael called to check in, I assured him I'd be back in the office the following week. "I'm glad to hear that, Gail," he said, relief evident in his voice. "We've missed you." "I've missed me too," I replied, surprising myself with the truth in those words. That evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, still wary of unknown callers, but something told me to take the chance. "Hello, Gail, it's Jessica." Her voice was small, broken. "I need help. Can you come get me?" I found Jessica waiting on a bench outside the emergency room entrance, a small duffel bag at her feet. When she looked up, I saw a bruise darkening along her jaw. She was cradling her right wrist against her chest. "He found out about the FBI investigation," she said, as I helped her into my car. He completely lost it. Did you report him? I asked, eyeing her injuries. She nodded. They took photos, documented everything. He's been arrested again, violation of his bail conditions. Where are we going? I asked as I started the car. I don't know. I can't go home. He'll kill me if he gets out again. Her voice caught on a sob. I'm sorry, Gail. I'm so sorry for everything. Despite everything that had happened between us, my heart broke seeing her so defeated. This was my sister, the girl who had taught me to ride a bike, who'd defended me against bullies in middle school, who'd held my hand at our grandmother's funeral. You'll stay with me at Mom and Dad's, I said decisively. We'll figure this out together. For the first week, Jessica barely spoke, spending most of her time sleeping or staring blankly at the television. The spark that had always defined her was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed wariness that reminded me too much of my own recent state. Detective Parker arranged for Jessica to meet with a domestic violence advocate named Tricia, who helped her obtain an emergency restraining order against Craig. During one of these meetings, I stepped out to give them privacy, but Jessica called me back. I want you to hear this too, she said, gripping my hand tightly. I need to stop hiding. Over the next 2 hours, Jessica revealed the full extent of Craig's abuse, how it had started subtly with controlling her finances, isolating her from friends, criticizing her appearance and decisions. The physical violence began 6 months into their marriage, always followed by tearful apologies and promises to change. Why didn't you tell anyone? I asked gently. Shame at first, she admitted. Then fear. He said he'd hurt you, hurt Mom and Dad if I ever tried to leave. She placed a protective hand over her growing belly. When I got pregnant, I thought things would improve. Instead, they got worse. He said the baby trapped him, that it was my fault for getting pregnant. Tricia provided resources, support groups, counseling options, legal assistance. Jessica enrolled in a program specifically for pregnant women leaving abusive relationships. Meanwhile, I began gathering evidence for both our cases against Craig. I tracked down the woman from Craig's first marriage, along with 2 others who had dated him briefly. All described similar patterns of control, manipulation, and violence. Aunt Sally introduced me to her friend, Detective Amanda Parker, who took a special interest in our case. She helped coordinate our efforts with the FBI, ensuring that Craig remained in custody as multiple investigations proceeded. Financial crimes cases can be complicated, Parker explained. They take time to build, but we're making progress. With Craig securely behind bars, the threatening messages stopped. Gradually, I began reclaiming my life. I returned to work full-time, reconnected with friends, and even started training for a half marathon, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the courage to attempt. As weeks turned into months, both Jessica and I grew stronger. Her pregnancy progressed normally, despite the stress the baby boy developing right on schedule. We transformed my childhood bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a peaceful sage green. I've decided on a name, Jessica told me one evening as we assembled a crib, Daniel, after Dad. And his middle name will be Gail. Daniel Gale. I laughed. Poor kid. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in ages. Daniel Gale Turner. Though I'm thinking of changing his last name to Reynolds. Our family slowly healed as well. The relatives who had initially sided with Craig now rallied around us, embarrassed by their earlier judgments. Aunt Martha brought over casseroles weekly. Uncle Pete helped install additional security features at my parents' house. One breakthrough came when I mentioned to Detective Parker that Craig had once left his laptop at my apartment and never reclaimed it. It was still in my storage unit, untouched for months. That could be crucial evidence, she said eagerly, if it contains financial records. The laptop proved to be a goldmine of information. Craig had kept detailed spreadsheets of his gambling debts, loan shark contacts, and money laundering activities through his supposed businesses. There were also draft emails to Jessica, containing explicit threats about what would happen if she ever left him. As the criminal case built against Craig, I installed security cameras at my apartment, preparing to eventually move back. I began recording all phone conversations and saved every text message, building a comprehensive record of everything related to the case. Jessica and I attended a support group for domestic violence survivors together. Hearing other women's stories, some far worse than ours, put our experience in perspective and reminded us how fortunate we were to have escaped. "You saved my life," Jessica told me after one particularly emotional session. "If you hadn't stood up to him, I might never have found the strength to leave." "You saved yourself," I corrected her. "And your baby." 4 months after Craig's arrest, Detective Parker called with unexpected news. The FBI has been running a sting operation targeting organized crime in the gambling world. Turns out some of Craig's dangerous connections were actually undercover agents. "What does that mean for our case?" I asked. "It means we have recordings of Craig discussing the assault, the forgery, everything. He was trying to impress them, prove he was tough enough to work with them." The evidence was damning. Craig had boasted about teaching his wife's sister a lesson, described forging my signature, and detailed his plans to intimidate me into dropping the charges. With this new information, the district attorney offered Craig a plea deal: 12 years for the combined charges of aggravated assault, forgery, witness intimidation, and money laundering. His alternative was to face trial with the possibility of 20 years or more. Craig's attorney advised him to take the deal. The day he accepted the plea was the first day I truly believed this nightmare might end. 2 weeks before Craig's sentencing hearing, I sat at my kitchen table working on my victim impact statement. The words wouldn't come. How could I possibly compress the trauma, fear, and eventual triumph into a few minutes of speech? My phone rang. "Jessica, can you come to the hospital? Now." Her voice was strained. "Is it the baby? It's too early. My water broke. Mom's driving me in. Please come." I abandoned my statement and rushed to the hospital. Despite being 6 weeks premature, little Daniel Gale Reynolds entered the world healthy and strong, with a powerful set of lungs and a full head of dark hair. As I held my nephew for the first time, watching his tiny fingers wrap around mine, I felt the final pieces of my broken heart begin to heal. "He's perfect," I whispered to Jessica, who looked exhausted but radiant. "He's free," she corrected me. "He'll never know his father. Never live in fear." The day of Craig's sentencing arrived. I stood in the courthouse bathroom, straightening my blazer and taking deep breaths. My completed victim impact statement felt heavy in my hands. Jessica appeared beside me in the mirror, adjusting her own outfit. She'd left 2-week-old Daniel with our parents for the hearing. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. Together. Together. We walked into the courtroom side by side, our heads held high. Craig sat at the defense table, looking smaller, somehow diminished in his orange jumpsuit. When he saw us enter, his eyes narrowed with familiar malice. For a moment, old fear flickered through me. Then I straightened my shoulders and met his gaze directly. He was the one in shackles now. He was the one facing years behind bars. He had no power over us anymore. When called to deliver my statement, I approached the podium calmly. Looking directly at the judge rather than Craig, I spoke clearly about the attack, its physical and emotional impact, and the long journey to recovery. "The bruises have healed," I concluded. But the memory of my own sister standing by as her husband assaulted me, that wound cut deeper than any physical injury. It's taken months of therapy support and hard work to rebuild what was broken that day. I'm not the same person I was before. I'm stronger. And I stand here today, not just for myself, but for every person who has ever been intimidated into silence. Jessica spoke next, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger as she detailed the pattern of abuse she'd endured, culminating in Craig's attack on me, and later on, her. "I gave birth to our son 2 weeks ago," she said, her voice catching. "A child Craig will never meet, never influence, never harm. I didn't find the courage to leave until I saw what he did to my sister. Her strength showed me what I couldn't see for myself, that no one deserves to live in fear, especially not a child." The judge's sentence was decisive: 14 years, 2 more than the plea deal had outlined, with no possibility of parole for at least 10. As Craig was led away, he turned to glare at us one last time. But this time neither Jessica nor I looked away. We stood our ground, hands clasped together, finally free of his shadow. 6 months after Craig's sentencing, Jessica and I sat on our parents' back porch watching the sunset. Baby Daniel, now sturdy and alert at 8 months old, bounced happily on my lap, his chubby hands reaching for the colorful toys dangling from his playmat. "I never thought we'd be here," Jessica said, softly sipping her iced tea. "There were days I was sure he'd kill me. Or you." I nodded, understanding completely. The journey had been long and difficult, but we'd emerged on the other side, stronger than before. After Craig's imprisonment, Jessica had moved into a small apartment near our parents, determined to build an independent life for herself and Daniel. She'd returned to nursing part-time with Mom and Dad, eagerly providing childcare. I had returned to my own apartment and thrown myself back into my architectural work with renewed passion. The trauma wasn't gone. We both still attended therapy regularly, but it no longer defined us. "Do you remember that time in 3rd grade when Tommy Wilson pushed me off the swing and you marched right up and pushed him back?" Jessica asked suddenly. I laughed. "And then we both got detention. You've always been the brave one." "Even then." "That's not true," I objected. "You're the one who moved out on your own with a baby. You're rebuilding your entire life. Because you showed me how." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "When I think about how I treated you, what I let happen—" "Stop," I interrupted gently. "We've been through this. You were a victim too." Daniel gurgled and reached for my face. I kissed his pudgy fingers, marveling at his perfect, tiny fingernails. "He looks more like you every day," I told Jessica. "He has your eyes." "And your stubbornness," she replied with a smile. "He never gives up when he wants something." The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Mom appeared on the porch a moment later. "Gail, there's someone here to see you, a Detective Parker." Amanda Parker stood in our parents' living room, looking different in casual clothes rather than her usual professional attire. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," she said. "I was in the neighborhood and wanted to deliver this news in person." My heart raced. "Is it Craig? Did something happen?" She shook her head quickly. "No, nothing like that. He's exactly where he should be." She smiled. "Actually, it's about the support group you and Jessica mentioned starting." During our recovery, Jessica and I had discussed creating a support network specifically for victims of financial abuse, people whose partners used money, debt, or financial fraud as tools of control. We'd been gathering information and resources, but hadn't taken concrete steps yet. "The department has some funding available for community outreach programs," Parker explained. "When I mentioned your idea to the chief, he was very interested. There's nothing like it in our area." She handed me a folder containing grant information and application forms. "It's not a huge amount, but it could help with getting started meeting space materials, maybe even a part-time coordinator eventually." Jessica had joined us, Daniel on her hip. "Are you serious?" Parker nodded. "Financial abuse is often overlooked, but it's one of the most common tactics in domestic violence. Your experience could help a lot of people." That conversation sparked a new chapter in our healing journey. Over the next year, with Aunt Sally's expert guidance and Detective Parker's support, we established Clear Accounts, a support group and resource center for financial abuse survivors. The program grew quickly, eventually expanding to include legal aid for victims dealing with credit fraud, identity theft, and forged documents. Jessica's nursing background proved invaluable as she developed a component addressing the physical and emotional health impacts of financial stress and abuse. Our family healed as well. The relatives who had initially sided with Craig became our strongest supporters, often volunteering at Clear Accounts events. Uncle Pete used his connections as a retired banker to bring in financial advisors who offered free consultations to program participants. On Daniel's first birthday, we hosted a celebration at our parents' house. As I watched my nephew toddle across the lawn squealing with delight, as family members took turns chasing him, I felt a profound sense of peace. The fear that had once dominated our lives was gone, replaced by joy and possibility. Later that evening, as guests departed, and Jessica put an overtired Daniel down for a nap, Aunt Sally joined me on the porch swing. "You know what today is, don't you?" she asked. I looked at her questioningly. 1 year, since Craig's sentencing. I hadn't realized the dates coincided. I guess I stopped keeping track. Sally nodded approvingly. "That's how you know you're really healing, when the anniversaries pass unnoticed." She was right. The dates that had once loomed so large, the attack, the hospital stay, the court appearances, had begun to fade in importance, compared to the milestones we now celebrated. Daniel's first steps, Jessica's promotion, the opening of our third Clear Accounts location. 3 months later, I stood before a packed conference room at the National Domestic Violence Prevention Summit, sharing our story with advocates, law enforcement officers, and survivors from across the country. "Financial abuse leaves no visible bruises," I explained, displaying slides that outlined the warning signs and statistics, but its impact can be devastating and long-lasting. When my brother-in-law forged my signature on that mortgage application, he wasn't just committing fraud, he was attempting to control and manipulate both my sister and me through financial means. As I concluded my presentation, I noticed Jessica standing at the back of the room, smiling proudly. She'd initially been reluctant to have our story shared so publicly, but had gradually recognized the power in breaking the silence that so often protected abusers. "The most important lesson I learned through our ordeal," I told the audience, "is that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to stand firm in your truth, even when everyone expects you to bend. Real family stands with you when you're broken, not when it's convenient." The applause was overwhelming. Afterward, a line of people waited to speak with me, many sharing their own stories of financial abuse and control. One young woman, barely older than 20, clutched my hand tightly. "I thought I was crazy," she whispered. "My boyfriend convinced me to take out loans for his business, then threatened to hurt my little brother when I questioned where the money went. I didn't know this had a name." "You're not crazy," I assured her. "And you're not alone." That evening, Jessica, Daniel, and I had dinner with Detective Parker, who had also presented at the conference. As we shared stories and laughed over dessert, I marveled at how our worst experience had led to some of our most meaningful connections. "I have some news," Jessica announced as we finished our coffee. "I've decided to go back to school. There's a program in forensic nursing I've been looking at." "That's fantastic," I exclaimed. "Is this because of your work with Clear Accounts?" She nodded. "I want to help other survivors the way Detective Parker helped us. Make sure the evidence is properly documented, connect them with resources." Parker raised her water glass. "To new beginnings." As we clinked glasses, my phone chimed with a text. It was from Aunt Sally. "Turn on Channel 4 now." I asked the waitress to switch the restaurant's TV to the news. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, "Local nonprofit receives $1 million grant to expand financial abuse prevention programs." The camera cut to our most recent Clear Accounts workshop, showing Jessica guiding a group of women through a credit repair exercise, while I spoke with a pro bono attorney. "That's us," Jessica gasped. The reporter explained that Clear Accounts had been selected for a major foundation grant to expand our services nationwide. The screen showed clips from survivor testimonials, including several women we'd worked with personally. The restaurant staff and nearby diners, realizing we were the women on screen, broke into spontaneous applause. Jessica blushed, but I could see the pride in her eyes as she hugged Daniel close. Later that night, as we walked back to our hotel, Jessica linked her arm through mine. "Remember when you used to design fancy buildings?" she teased. "I still do," I reminded her. "This is just my side hustle now." Who would have thought that the worst day of our lives would lead to all of this? I looked at my sister, stronger and more resilient than I'd ever seen her, and at my nephew sleeping peacefully against her shoulder, secure in the knowledge that he would grow up in a home filled with love and safety. "Sometimes the things that try to break us become the reasons we build something better," I said. 6 months later, we gathered at our parents' house for Thanksgiving, the first holiday where the entire extended family would be together since before the attack. As I helped Mom in the kitchen, I could hear Daniel's delighted squeals as Dad and Uncle Pete played with him in the living room. Jessica entered, carrying a stack of plates for the table. Aunt Martha just arrived. She brought 3 pies and enough guilt to feed an army. I laughed. Some things never change. But some things do, she replied softly. Look at us now. Indeed, we had both transformed. Jessica had completed her first semester back at school with straight A's. I had recently been made partner at my firm with a specialty in designing domestic violence shelters and community centers. Clear Accounts was thriving with branches opening in 5 new states. As we all gathered around the table, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends, Dad stood to offer a toast. This past year has taught us the true meaning of family, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Not just standing together in good times, but fighting for each other when it matters most. I'm grateful for second chances for healing, and most of all, he looked directly at Jessica and me for the incredible strength of my daughters. I reached for Jessica's hand under the table and squeezed it tight. We had walked through fire together and emerged not just intact, but transformed. The bonds that Craig had tried to destroy had instead been forged into something unbreakable. Today I no longer jump at sudden noises or check over my shoulder when walking to my car. Jessica no longer flinches when someone raises their voice. Daniel is growing into a happy, confident little boy who has never known fear in his own home. This is the life we fought for. This is the victory we claimed from the ashes of betrayal. And this is the story I share, not with shame, but with pride. Because sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to be silenced. If you're watching this and our story resonates with you, please know that help is available. Financial abuse is real, and you deserve to be free from it. Have you ever stood up for yourself when everyone expected you to give in? Share your experience in the comments below. And if our story touched you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for listening, and remember, your truth is worth fighting for, no matter how hard the battle.